Wow. I don't know what happened, but this thing just stopped. All right, I'm gonna wait a few minutes to try to get the people back on board, give them time to come back in before we go any further. Wow, that's crazy that the video just halted all by itself. All right, I'm gonna give y'all a few minutes before I go forward. Hallelujah. I didn't get that. I didn't understand that. Wow. I and confiscation of goods. 20 minutes. And it stopped. Okay. Wow. That is very confusing why that happened. The video, I mean, my Facebook feed just totally dropped. So the first portion of what we was talking on has been, well, I'm gonna have to upload that. It was about 20 minutes worth of feed. But I was trying to bring to point what he was just sharing. Uh, the Isabel and Ferdinand, they're vanquishing the Jews as well as the Moors. Now remember, they went in and conquered in 700. This is 1490 something, 80, no, 55, 60. So we're talking about for almost 700 years. You have grown in this land, in this country. You have established yourself. You have established your family's legacy. So that means you ain't no telling how much property that most of them own. So here lies the problem. With all that property, they're being told you have to leave Spain forever. You got to leave your goods. You can't take them back. And on top of that, you can never come back here. So remember, they've been there for 700 years. I mean, I know that's might not be a long time, but can you imagine from the wealth you have accumulated from the wars that you fought in, then establishing your family, securing their future in that country of Spain? And now all of a sudden being told that you can no longer stay here. You got to go. You, your children, and your kids, with what little goods you could get up out of here, but you got to go. So they weren't able to take all of their possessions. So you're going to see this creates somewhat of a problem.
Skipping ahead. The Jews, thus driven from Spain, fled for the most part into Portugal and obtained from King John, under certain conditions, that they might live there for a certain season. The conditions were chiefly these: that everyone should pay to the king 8 pieces of gold, and leave Portugal within a limited time, and forfeit their liberty if they exceeded it, or in other words, if they stayed too long. So we see the Jews left the kingdom of Spain and fled into Portugal. And notice the size of the kingdom of Spain compared to the kingdom of Portugal. In other words, the Jews who lived in the kingdom of Spain fled into the much smaller kingdom of Portugal. This resulted in a high concentration of Spanish Jews in Portugal, as the following reference reads. The number of those who were thus banished from Spain were 400,000 Jews, according to Ruggelin and others. Mariana says, "'Tis not easy to reduce them to any certain number. Most writers affirm there were 170,000 families departed. Others say there were 800,000 persons, a prodigious number, almost exceeding belief. Some of them who were late in gathering together their effects and would not turn Christians were sold as slaves. And of those who left their country, Sarita tells us, many died of the fatigues of traveling or the plague." After
Yeah. Now, see, over 800,000 fled from their homes and ended up leaving Spain, as you could see, which was much larger than what Portugal was. So now it creates a somewhat of a vacuum. You already got a large number of people that's living in Portugal, which is a very tiny little space. And now you got 800,000 dark skinned people moving in. And you know they bad because they fought you for 700 years, conquered your town, your city, and now the table's being turned. They being thrown out for a reason. Something happened. Something happened that the table flipped script on the Jews that lived in Spain and in Portugal.
The Jews fled from Spain to Portugal in 1492. Roughly 1 year later, in 1493, Portugal expelled its Spanish born Jews to West Africa.
Again, catch that date. Uh-oh, what's going on with my... Leave that alone. Let's catch that date. When I was in school, I had a problem with history. Really didn't like it, didn't understand it. It was problematic because everything that was being said, it wasn't lining up with what was really down in my heart. Didn't understand what was in my heart, but it was something that the Father put there, I guess for later on, for me to question, which I started doing. But I don't remember who it was. I don't know if it was my cousin Audrey Fletcher or Demetrius Williams or one of them. But in school, I remember who Columbus was. The saying was 1492. Columbus sailed the deep blue. And I'm like, okay, that's how I was able to keep up with that date. But now again, remember, 1492, Spain kicked them out. 1493, Portugal kicks them out. But in 1492, Columbus is being paid by who? Yeah, go figure. The same year that they're kicked out, this dude gets on a boat and going down into South America, claiming he looking for America, but we found out that was all hogwash. These were the lies that they told them, but now we can find them out. To find out all that was just a sham. This dude went down there, took slaves down into because I met a sister online, Nairia. She lives in Trinidad and Tobago. I befriended her because I wanted to know what it was like living in Trinidad and Tobago. And one of the things that I asked her was, how did you arrive there? And she told me she was born there, but it was through Christopher Columbus. Wow. I said, what? Yeah. Brought them folks over there and made them slaves. I'm like, wow. See what I'm saying? The history has been hidden, but by people that lives around the globe, according to Deuteronomy 28, man, y'all got to go read that. A lot of people try to discount that as not being true or it ain't us. Come on. We the only people on the face of the earth that fit that script of the curse of Deuteronomy 28, beginning at verse 15 all the way to verse number 68. You should go into Egypt again, this time by ship. Well, this is what's going on. They're sending you from one place to Africa. They're picking you up from Africa and dispersing you down into the Caribbean islands, into the Americas, and you fist to hear the rest of that. So before I go any further talking, let's get back to what's really going
Years
on.
later, Portugal then expelled its Portuguese-born Jews to the west coast of Africa. The expulsion of the Jews from Portugal began under King John II. This is when the Red Dragon began to separate the children of Judah from their parents in order to create what's called the Christian slave. as the following reference reads. And it reads, all Jewish children below 14 years of age were torn or taken from their parents' arms, dragged into the church, baptized into Roman Christianity. Then it says, those under 3 years of age, or those under 3 years old, were given to Christians to receive a Christian education, or in other words, to be raised as slaves. Those between 3 and 10 years of age were put on board of a ship, conveyed to the newly discovered unwholesome island of St. Thomas, or the west coast of Africa. And it reads, those between 10 and 14 years were sold as slaves.
Pause for the cause. Now you have to understand exactly what is going on. Look, I want to read from Deuteronomy 28 and 32. Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people. Thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thy hand. The fruit of thy land and thy labors shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up, and thou shalt be only oppressed and crushed always, so that thou shalt be mad for the sight of thine eyes, which thou shalt see. The Lord shall smite thee in the knees and in the legs with a sore botch that cannot be healed from the side of thy foot unto the top of the head. Now notice what's happening. They snatching the children away from the parents to be raised as what? Christian slaves. Now you got to see this picture and check it out real good. In the book of Proverbs. Proverbs 14 tells you to train up a child in the way that they should go. Why would you want to train up a child? Because, see, a child is innocent. And if you can pre-program them in their infancy, by the time they become a teenager, it's already etched in stone in their mind. So not only is you training them to be a Christian, but you also training them to be a what? A Christian slave. So every generation that you spitting out children, it's in the mindset that this is something normal for your generation. This is something normal for your people. Why? You have been conditioned as a child. So now that you're a parent, you gonna teach your children's children the same thing, to be what? Submissive to Massa. Yeah, this is how they were able to control us. And yet, there was some that still had that fight in them. Yeah, they don't tell too many of those stories about the ones who stood up, the ones who fought that ended up getting hung on a tree, head lifted off their body, or they got totally chopped up and distributed around the South so everybody could know that they were in control. Wow, come on, people. The Deuteronomy curse is real. We are the true descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We bear the marks of the cursed people of the Bible. Time for you to return back to Yah. But let's get back to the rest of this, because it's going to get even gooder. Is that such a word? Is that such a word? It's gooder?
Christian slaves. Let's read another reference. And it reads, by the year 1470, the Portuguese had found the equatorial island of Sao Tome, or St. Thomas, in the Guinea Gulf, off the coast of Africa. The climate proved to be extremely unwholesome for Europeans, and settlement was slow. The official chronicler of King John II, Garcia de Resende, reports on one of the methods to populate this island that also throws some light on the tragic form of Jewish participation in the Portuguese Atlantic Empire. The king had allowed Jewish refugees from Spain, from where they had been expelled in 1492, to remain in Portugal only in return for payment of an enormous ransom. In 1493, those who could not pay had their children taken away from them, baptized by force or baptized into Roman Christianity, and deported to Sao Tome or St. Thomas in order to be raised as Christians. Skipping ahead, and it reads, nothing is known of their further fate.
Nah, see, he skipped ahead, but I want to read the rest of that. In 1493, it says those who could not pay had their children taken away from them, baptized by force, deported to Sao Tome in order to be raised as Christians and to help populate the island that the king had just leased to Alvaro. Did y'all get that? They couldn't pay, so they took the children, deported the children. They took the children, sent them to the island to repopulate the island. Come on, y'all.
Although later chroniclers attribute the thriving sugar production on the plantations on the island to the talents of these deported children and their offspring. As you can see, the children of Judah were taken from their parents to be raised as Christians on the west coast of Africa and also to be raised as slaves. Now let's go on to another reference, which reads, the Portuguese that dwelt on this island informed the Netherlanders, the Dutch, that few lived above 50 years there, yet notwithstanding the great gain templed them to tarry, several of them having 200 or 300 Negroes that worked in the sugar mills, that John III, King of Portugal, sent a colony thither above 200 years before, whom though the unwholesome air destroyed, yet the place was not less desolate. For he sent new inhabitants, which first settled Guinea, which is the west coast of Africa, next in Angola, the west coast of Africa, and lastly on the island of St. Thomas, that so they might be better used to the air. Then it reads, that the said king sold all those Jews for slaves, or the children of Judah, that refused to embrace the Roman religion. And it says, and caused their children to be baptized into Roman Christianity, from whom coming thither in great numbers, most of the present inhabitants were descendants. And again, we see the children of Judah were taken from their parents and to be raised as Christians and slaves on the west coast of Africa.
Now, what you also got to understand, going on in the west coast of Africa, notice what he said, the Netherlanders. Most of you don't really catch that. Netherlands, that's the country, Netherlands, the Netherlands. I lived in Germany, which was close to the Dutch. They call them Deutschland. These were white people that were brought on the island, but because of the heat, ain't got none of this in them, melanin. Because of the melanin, they weren't able to live and last, but guess who could? That's right. Brought us in the west coast of Africa and New Guinea first. Remember, he said brought them over to New Guinea, then Angola. This is the west coast of Africa. It's real hot down there. And guess what? Because of this, we don't get cancer. Not from the sun. And if you ever look at any kind of video that put the sunscreen on, I was watching this video that in one camera you see the white person's face, but as they began to smear on the sunscreen, which looks like it's white or pink or beige, coming out the tube, right? And as they began to rub the sunscreen on their face, guess what they was doing? Like they was painting blackface. Yeah. These people weren't stupid. They knew, hey, the white people that are slaves, don't forget, they were white slaves as well as black slaves. But these white slaves were dying out under them harsh conditions, trying to raise the sugar cane and the tobacco. But guess who could stand the pain? The dark-skinned Jews, the sons and the daughters that were kidnapped or taken and raised as what? A Christian slave.
And let's read yet another reference. And this reference reads, the first design of settling there was in the year 1486. But perceiving how many perished in the attempt, that they could better agree with that of the continent on the coast of Guinea, it was resolved by King John II of Portugal that all the Jews within his dominion, which were vastly numerous, should be obliged to receive baptism, or, upon refusal, be transported to the coast of Guinea, or the west coast of Africa, where the Portuguese had already several considerable settlements and a good trade considering the time since its first discovery. We also note that the Inquisition sent the children of Judah to the west coast of Africa, just like the previous expulsion edicts or the commandments to get out. As the following reference reads, and it reads, it is at 8 degrees from the line towards the south on the coast of Africa, between Guinea and the Cape of Good Hope. It is the poorest country in the world, and living is exceedingly dear there, for it produces only some fruits. What costs 10 souls in France will cost 40 in Brazil, and 100 there. No other traffic is carried on but in Negro slaves. The Portuguese hold it solely for this purpose, and would not otherwise inhabit it, for the land produced only some fruits, and cattle, and but small store of these. Moreover, in Spain, they but seldom put their malefactors or their criminals to death, as we do in France. They send them all to these desert countries, west coast of Africa, to traffic there or to be sold as slaves. And we can also cross-check this by looking into the text of the Libro Negro. The Libro Negro is a book that contains the guidelines for the Inquisition, and it also contains the punishments for those that were convicted by the Inquisition. As we look at the punishments of the Inquisition, we see that the punishment of those convicted involved sending them to the west coast of Africa. As the following reference reads, and it reads, if noble persons, they shall be exiled to Angola, which is on the west coast of Africa, or St. Thomas, which is also on the west coast of Africa. Okay, let's review. So we showed that many Spanish Jews fled into Portugal, fled from the large territory of Spain into the smaller territory of Portugal. And then we also read references to show that the children of the Jews were then sent to the west coast of Africa to be raised as Christians and as slaves. This was done by the expulsion edicts, but we also read references to show that the Inquisition as well sent Jews to the west coast of Africa. Now let's cross-check our findings using an additional reference. In the 1500s, an anonymous painter depicted everyday life in Portugal in the city of Lisbon. Let's see if we can find the Spanish and Portuguese Jews in this painting. In our references, we read that the children of the Jews were taken from their parents. In this picture, we see a person being taken. Now, let's read a reference to see how these children were taken. And the following reference reads, and it reads, the Moors immediately passed over into Africa. And it says, and as the Jews were preparing to depart, the king commanded that all their children who were not above 14 years old should be taken from their parents and educated in the Christian religion.
Now, again, remember, I just told you that. I don't know why that happened in the manner that it did, but for whatever reasons, they let the Moors leave out. Now, here go the problem. The Moors, and if you trace your history, they was considered one of the greatest empires that ruled, again, because it was never told that we fought with them and helped them to conquer to become what they became. And again, under the Moorish banner, they're able to leave. Moor mean dark. They were dark just like us, but they knew they didn't look exactly like us. It was something totally different about us that they let the Moors leave up out of there. But when we got ready to check out, it said immediately, what happened? Yeah, something happened right then when they began to try to check out of there. Problematic. Their children were snatched. And again, in that painting, you're going to see where the child is being taken and the parent right behind, but then it got the four constables. Then you're going to see in the painting where the man is set on fire. And these were all part of the Spanish Inquisition. So again, how you became a Christian, this is how you began to accept Sunday worship, because they were being put to death for holding on to the laws, the statutes, and the commandments of the Most High. And commandment number 4, we know, remember the Sabbath day. This was the main function of the red dragon that he changed. And you're going to find that out in history. Read the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter, verse number 25. These people, which are Hebrew Israelites, dark-skinned folk, the Negro, you that's listening, you might be light, bright, almost white, but you are the true descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So under the red dragon, his theme was to grab the children, pre-program the children, send them on the island as a Christian slave. Now you go produce babies, and what are you going to train your baby? To be a Christian slave. But the whole main thing was to get you away from Sabbath worship. This is what Christianity done. Got you from the practice of what you were practicing before you became a slave. Let's get back to the video. Huh?
It was a most affecting thing to see children snatched from the embraces of their mothers, and fathers embracing their children, violently torn from them, and even beat with clubs. And in our picture, we see the child being taken, and one of the captors carrying a club. So our reference lines up with the painting. Now let's take a look at an additional reference to see how many persons were used to take the children. And the following reference reads, he was preceded by a turnkey and followed by 4 constables. In this reference, we see that prisoners were followed by 4 constables. And as we look in our painting, we see that there are 2 constables holding the child, followed by 2 additional constables in the rear, one of which holding the club, the other walking next to the constable holding the club, for a total of 4 constables. Now, additional references show that the Jews who didn't submit to the Red Dragon's religion, they were burned in the city square in a ceremony called Auto de Fe. Now, in this painting, we see that there is a gentleman being burned in the city square.
There he is, being burned.
Auto de Fe. And we can also see this in our references where it says, at the place of execution, which at Lisbon is Ribeira, there are many stakes set upon there are prisoners to be burnt. And for an additional reference, we show that the Jews who were forcibly converted to Christianity, were required to wear an identifying mark on their upper garment. And the following reference reads, and it reads, "The decree which was published in most parts of Spain filled the Jews with such consternation that 17,000 immediately returned to the church and submitted themselves to whatever censure or penance should be inflicted. 2,000 of this miserable people, part of whom confessed that Jesus Christ was the true Messiah, were still put to death."
Did y'all catch that? Man, 17,000 went and got converted. In other words, were willing to go through whatever it is that they wanted them to go through, while 2,000 of them still profess who did they say? Not Yahushua HaMashiach. Yeah, the name didn't change. They calling him Jesus Christ. So they confessed Jesus Christ. And what happened to them? They still got put to death. Come on, people, wake up. We running out of time.
Many were sentenced. Now, for a quick note, just notice that the Jews, even though they confessed Christ, they were still put to death. As stated in the previous videos, the Jews weren't being persecuted by the Red Dragon for merely following the Messiah. The Jews were being persecuted because they were following the Messiah and because they were following the laws,
statutes, and commandments. See?
Of the Most High God. All right. Well, let's continue with this reference. It reads, "Many were sentenced to a long imprisonment, and after regaining their liberty, were ordered to wear 2 red crosses on their upper garment." And we can see in this painting, this gentleman has a red cross on his upper garment. And then last but not least, let's read a quick reference which discusses the color of these Jews that are in Portugal. And it reads, "King John II in 1492 expelled all the Jews to the island of St. Thomas, which had been discovered in 1471, and to the other Portuguese settlements on the continent of Africa. And from these banished Jews, the Black Portuguese, as they are called." These Jews are called Black Portuguese. Okay, we read references showing the red dragon separating the children from their mothers and fathers. Once separated, the red dragon dispersed the children throughout their kingdoms, and also sent the children to the west coast of Africa to be Christians and to be slaves. This was prophesied of the children of Judah in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28. Verse 32 reads, "Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thine hands." Verse 41 reads, "Thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity." And last but not least, verse 64 reads, "And Yah shall scatter thee among all people, from one end of the earth even unto the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither you nor your fathers have known, even wood and stone."
Wood and stone, Christianity and Islam.
Once the Red Dragon began creating its Christian slaves in the 1490s, the transatlantic slave trade started in the 1500s. Most people don't know that when the slave trade started, the first slaves to come to the Americas didn't come from Africa. And it is because only a certain type of slave could be a transatlantic slave.
Hear this.
In other words, there were strict requirements for slaves shipped to the Americas. In fact, it was a law. And the following reference reads, and it reads, "The King of Spain regulates the importation of African slaves into the Americas." The regular shipment of slaves from Africa to European possessions in the Americas began in the early 1500s. although the greatest growth would not take place until the spread of plantation agriculture, especially sugar, after the 1640s. The development of colonial labor needs arose from a combination of exhaustion of the indigenous stores of precious metals by the European looting, together with the decimation of the local populations by diseases introduced from Europe. In order to make their colonies pay, the Spanish needed workers to produce goods and people able to resist diseases that caused such high death rates among Native Americans and European settlers. The first slaves imported on a regular basis were Africans from Portugal, who had first been converted to Christianity. And the following reference reads, it was with the design of ameliorating the condition of the natives that she sanctioned the introduction into the colonies of Negro slaves born in Spain. The early transatlantic slave trade from a university webpage, and it reads, from 1501 until 1518, the transatlantic slave trade was comprised of black slaves transported from Iberia, which is Portugal and Spain. Direct slave traffic from Africa was not initially permitted. For the same reason, the colonists were repeatedly forbidden from bringing enslaved Muslims and Moriscos to the Americas. There was a charter granted by Emperor Charles V to Lorenzo de Gouravad for permission to transport slaves. If we scroll down, it says, before 1518, the slave trade was highly regulated and consisted mostly of slaves being sent from Spain to the Americas directly by the Spanish government. The first transatlantic slaves came directly from Spain and Portugal and were shipped to the Americas. Note that this was during the time when Spain and Portugal were taking the children of Judah from their parents to be raised as Christians and as slaves. Yah willing, we'll take a closer look at the identity of those that were shipped directly from Spain and Portugal, as well as those shipped from Africa to the Americas. This marks the end of part 2 of our mini-series, The Christian Slave. Stay tuned for part 3 in the coming weeks. Now, as always, thanks for watching and sharing these videos, and thank you for all those who have donated and lifted me and my family up in your prayers. May the Most High bless and keep the children of Israel safe, along with Israel's companions in these last days. Shalom.
All right, my peeps, it's been good. It's been good. But did you understand that last part? Did you really catch hold to that? Again, the children of Israel, which were coming from Jerusalem, 70 AD, migrated into Africa, went into Spain and Portugal with the Moors, conquered them, lived over there for 700 years, and because they began to sin, the Most High, not pleased with them, decided to do something about it, allowed them to be captured as slaves for what? Not keeping his laws, his statutes, and his commandments. The children taken away from them, raised to be what? Christian slaves. Well, as a Christian, what you don't do? You don't worship on the Sabbath. You worship statutes. You bow down to man. And you take stock in images. That's a Christian slave. Not only do you do that, you are an obedient, subservient to whomever is over you. And this is being taught. It's being passed down from generation after generation after generation, to the point now you're some 600 years removed from the first one coming over, 1492. This is what now, 2021. And yet still etched in the mindset of most of us modern day believers is held under the spell of Christianity. Yeah, I get arguments just about daily with people that don't want to accept the truth, that don't want to grasp the concept that we are who the Bible say we are. I have those that call me and check me on what color Yeshua was. And it's so crazy because we have established the fact from the beginning of these teachings, not just on Hidden Hebrews, but for over 5-6 years since I came into the knowledge of the truth, standing on the facts of who the true Hebrew Israelites are and what color of their skin, that Yeshua, HaMashiach, Jesus called the Christ, is a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who are all dark-skinned people, but all of a sudden when he's born blue-eyed and blonde hair. Come on, you go figure the narrative. This is the mentality of a lot of what we would call the house nigga and the field nigga. But a house nigga, you know, he's dictated by what's going on in the house, while the field nigga out there working in the field. And yet there are two different concepts going on in their head. If the big house begin to burn, the house nigga is like, come on, put some water on, let the fire die. And the field nigga is like, man, let that sucker burn. Let it burn down. Two different mindsets of two different types of people. And this is what happened to us, being pre-programmed through the inability of our foreparents that was subjugated to the slavery, the slave mentality, to those that was brought across, the good ship Jesus. For those of you that don't know nothing about that, the ship they came on was the name Jesus. Oh, go figure that one out. And yet they were given a name change. Oh, yeah. You go from having the name of Matanyahu to what? Toby. Yeah, this is what happened to us. Come on. Time for to wake up. The red dragon, he got something going on, getting ready to unleash his program. Why? Because he know his time is running out. But it only could work if you wake up. If you yet want to remain asleep, then I feel for you. Yeah, he said, when you see it coming, you that's on the housetop, don't come down. You that's in the desert, don't go back into the field. Come on, people. The kind and gracious Father, we thank you for the lesson on the day. We thank you for Brother Benaiah Israel. We pray special blessing over him, his household, that he will continue to make these videos, these documentaries, to help further the cause of awakening of your people. It was you that put us to sleep because of our disobedience, our stubbornness, and our hard-headedness. It is only you that can awaken us from the slumber that you put us in. So, Father, I pray now that everyone under the sound of my voice that is on the watch of this program, that know me personally, I pray for their ears to be enlightened of understanding, that their eyes become open to hear what your word is saying to the ecclesia church before it's everlasting too late. And as we get ready to depart from off of this line, this feed, that we don't depart from your presence, Abiyah, but that you bring us back together again at your appointed time. With that, my brothers and sisters, I want to thank you for sitting in with the brother watchman, Yahuwah Yahusha's house of prayer. Peace, blessings, Shalom. Okay, I say it. Peace and blessings.